Can I sit there, buddy? Get over here. Alrighty, Nana. Tell us some stories.
Do you want to hear some stories?
Tell us where you were born.
I was born in Clarkston, Utah. That's in Cache County, and that's up by Logan. And I was born in 1929, September the 20th, 1929. And I lived in Clarkston until I was 8 years old. Then I moved to Garland, Utah, and that's where I went all through school, was in Garland. That was my hometown. And I went to Bear River High School, and I loved it there. That was a lot of fun. And then I married Grandpa. He isn't with us today. It's too bad. He'd love to be. But he passed away. But when I married Grandpa, we moved down to Thatcher, down to Grantsville.
Did you meet him?
What?
Did you meet him in high school?
I knew Grandpa in high school. He was a great athlete. He could do anything, and he could swim. He could play basketball, football, baseball, everything you want to talk about, he could do it. And he was good. And that's where I met Grandpa, was in Bear River High School.
He knows him as Papa.
He what? No, good. I'll call him Papa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I graduated from Bear River High School and went to work in Tremonton at a place called Gamble's.
So Papa, how much older was Papa than you?
1 year.
So you weren't, I thought he was born in 25.
He was, and I was born in 26.
Well, you said 29.
Oh, good heck, let's straighten me out, honey, because that is wrong.
What?
He's just 1 year older than me.
Okay. He's going to go back to Grammy's.
Could he go all by himself, Scott?
You want a drink here? You watch the road both ways, okay?
Keep your eye on me, Scott, because I might say the wrong thing. That was way wrong. Yeah, good. He's 1 year older than I am, and I met him I knew him before I went to Bear River High School, but I got to know him better when I went there with Garland School, went to Bear River, and all the Tremont schools went there too. And so that's when I got to know your Grandpa. But then he flew away in an airplane in the Army in the war. And I didn't see him or have anything more to do with him until he came back from the war. He flew, I can't remember the kind of plane he flew, Scott.
I can't either.
But he flew, and he was lucky because he didn't get in the worst of the war. He just got right toward the end of it. And he was flying, but just like a month more, if he had been in there a month longer, he would have been sent over to Germany, where the big war was going on. And we were always grateful he didn't have to go over there. So then he came back from the war and came into the store where I was working in Tremont and asked for a date. And so I started going with him then and kept right on, married the guy.
What was the story when you were on a bus and he...
Oh, years and years ago when we were in high school, I'd go on a bus out to my friend Rhea Stanfield's home, and she lived out in Penrose, which was just a few miles from Thatcher, where Grandpa lived. And is it Grandpa they call him, or Papa? Papa. She was just right close to where Papa lived in Thatcher. And so I was going on the school bus to go out with my friend Gloria to stay with her overnight at her house out in Penrose. And we were riding on a school bus and your papa was making some funny remarks that I didn't think was too funny, so I threw my history book at him, and hit him a good one right side the head. So then he come over there and grabbed me and put me over his knee and just spanked me right hard. And I've never forgotten that, neither has anyone on the bus that day. That was really funny. But we, after that, we got a little bit older, and then I started dating Lytle, his brother. And before long, it was Daryl who asked me out, and it was him I went with all the rest of the time. I just had a great life when I was young. There was a place it was called Crystal Springs. I think it's still there. And all of the Bear River High School kids would go to Crystal Springs to have, but we'd go there to swim and to dance and to roller skate. We loved that place. And that's where I started going with Papa, was over at Crystal Springs, because when I was there roller skating, he was too. And so, and after that, we'd just go once in a while, and then we started dating quite often. And then I married him in, let me get this straight, Scott, on September the, let's see, you know, if I got behind the camera, I'd forget everything. And I'm going to. Anyway, it was September the 9th, 19...
Wait a minute there.
There's a thing right there that's got it on, honey.
Put that in there so.
It's right here. We were married on September the 9th, 1947. And we were married in the Salt Lake Temple, which is the temple my mom and dad were married in. And they came down. They came to the temple with Daryl and I in Salt Lake when we got married there. And Papa died. Let's see, he died in what year, honey? I hope I wrote.
2002.
What?
2002.
2000. Okay, you've got that, honey. He died on July the 16th, and he was 77 years old when he died. We had 13 grandkids, which we have a lot more than that now. I'm not going to read that, Scott, because we do have lots more than 13 grandkids now. Lots of them. And what else do you want me to tell you?
I don't know. What other stories that?
Hello, Steve Dana.
Hi there. Oh.
When Papa and I first got married, he went to work at Wendover, and they were digging those deep dikes, you know, so the water could run through the water could turn into salt. And that's where they got their salt from, was out there on those salt flats. And besides that, they had the biggest tarantula spiders I've ever seen in my life. So I absolutely just hated the place. And finally we left there and traveled for years with Dean, that's Grandpa's brother, and traveled all over the different little places in Utah. Got to know a lot of places I'd never been, had a lot of fun, and learned a lot of things. And I learned how to chop wood with the best of them. We moved into an old farmhouse that had a coal stove, and that's all there was. So if we wanted to heat anything, I had to get out there and chop wood. And I got so I could really chop wood. It was up in a place called, I've forgotten the name of the place. It's up there by Malad. And it was just kind of a little farming community. And we stayed there for that whole summer into the late fall. And what they were doing, they were running the backhoes, Dad and his brother Dean. But the farmers in that place farmed right to the very tip top of the mountains. I call them hills. They were not mountains. And they farmed, their machinery was just going right around, right up to the top of that mountain, and that's where Daryl and Dean laid all that pipe, was right up around the top part of that mountain. And we stayed there, learned a lot of things, Scott. I learned how to chop wood, make a wood and coal fire with the best of them. And besides that, I found out how to lose weight. It's all you got to do is get an axe and chop a little bit of wood. And I learned a lot of things because I never cooked. I made a cake in a coal stove oven. And boy, you have no idea how many cakes I threw away because they didn't turn out like I thought. That was fun. It was fun up there because we lived in this old ranch house, Scott, and right to the side of it, kind of down a little hill, was a little ice cold stream of water that came right out of the mountain. And so Papa would get up way early in the morning, go out there and throw a string. He had a string and put a hook on the end of it. And he'd run out there and hold that string and that hook in the water and bring home a fish every time for his breakfast. Right out of that little stream that came out of the mountain.
Is that when you lived with?
Well, we lived up in, we were right up above Richmond, and can you remember the name of that place, Steve? I can't either.
You lived with Dean?
Dean and Phyllis. Dean was Grandpa's brother, and we just traveled together because they both ran backhoes, and so we went wherever we went. They went. We had one washing machine and one, or two. We had two beds, and if I had 3 hours here, I could tell you the story about those beds up in that little place where we were. And they had more box elder bugs there than any place on earth. And I learned to detest box elder bugs. But it was a learning experience, Scotty, because I learned how to chop with that axe. Boy, I was good at that. We had to chop wood for 3 meals a day. And we were getting really good, and I was getting so skinny from chopping wood that I know exactly how to lose weight. Nobody I know has the energy anymore.
How old were you?
How old were you?
How old were you then? Or
I was about 22 when we were living up there.
22.
And one day I was making, that good 7-minute icing that we all like on our cakes, that white icing. And I was making that, and you boil the syrup first. You have to boil that to a certain temperature, and then you add all the other ingredients. As well, we didn't have a stove unless we built a fire in that old coal stove, and it was so hot. We just couldn't stand to build a fire in that stove very often. But I had the syrup to make that. The icing for that cake, and it was boiling on a hot plate. And I reached to get it, you know how it starts to tip, so you reach automatically out like that to catch it. And I caught both hands full of boiling syrup. Both hands, clear full. And Jim was a baby, and he happened to be asleep. He was 3 months old. And way up on the mountain, lived an old lady, Mrs. Christensen, and I met her in church. And she was such a sweet lady, and I didn't know what to do. My hands were full of boiling syrup, and it's like hard candy. That's what that hard candy's made out of. And the longer I stood there, the harder that was getting, and the worse it burned. So I dashed out the door, and she lived way up a hill, right at the top of that hill. And I knew, just from knowing that lady, that she was once a nurse. And I ran that was more than a mile. I ran down the hill from that house I lived in and around and up the hill to that Mrs. Christensen's house. And I was calling her name and screaming because I was burning just like crazy. When I got up there, I had 2 blisters like this on both hands. They just, oh, that was a terrible experience. And then, you know, to this day, I don't know why they don't use the remedy that she used. Because as bad as that burned me, and it was terrible, I don't have one scar. And it was cattails and lard. It couldn't be it had to be the real lard. It couldn't be like shortening or anything like that. It had to be the old-fashioned lard that they used for everything. And so she went right out in her little, it's a little kind of a pond out there by her house, grabbed the cattails and pulled them down off the sticks, you know, put them in this bowl and threw that. It's like it was in a package like butter comes in. She threw that lard in that with those cattails and mixed it with her hands and plastered that all over. In the meantime, my hands were burning that whole time. And there was those huge blisters in both hands. And she put that cattail and lard on there, and I don't have one scar. And I've often wondered, why don't they do that more often? Yeah, that's better than anything else I can think of. But anyway, that was just one of the places we moved to. And all those years with Dean and Phyllis, we were moving to different spots so that Dean and Daryl could dig with the backhoe wherever they needed the work done. And I didn't mind going any place at all, but I hated Wendover. Because
did they have more than one backhoe, or?
Yeah. And when we went out to Wendover, they'd have to work at night because it was so hot, red hot out on that salt flat. And so they'd have to work at night. And one night, Phyllis and I drove out to where they were working just to watch them, you know, for a little bit. And those tarantulas were that big around, those great big huge legs, you know. I'll never get over that. And then when those guys would dig a big hole, you know, then here would come in those giant spiders, and then, you know, walk over where the hole was and fall in. And there were just hundreds of them. Oh my Godfrey. I said I'll never live in Wendover as long as I can draw a breath. Hated those spiders. And there was just a lot of experiences like that we had traveling all those years with Papa in construction. And then one day he decided to have his own business. And it was a leap of faith if there ever was one. Because we didn't have a red cent. But your grandpa had a great rapport with Rasmussen Equipment in Salt Lake. They liked him and they liked the work that he did, and out of the clear blue sky for no reason except he lost his mind, I thought, he went in there and bought a backhoe. One of those big backhoes, not one of the little ones. And he came driving that out, and they had painted it a blue color that I've never seen before, and they named that Didrikson Blue. And oh, he was so proud of that. And you know, I think, Scott, in all my life, I've never felt so downhearted. I thought, this is the end of everything. I didn't have the faith your grandpa had, your papa, because he went ahead and paid for that and bought several more before he was through. But that's how we got started. He just went in there on blind faith and bought one of the big backhoes, not one of those little ones, but the big one. And we lived in fear from then on. Because if he couldn't find work and we couldn't make those great big payments, we would have lost that machine. But he was a good friend of Wheeler Equipment. He had a fellow in there that really liked your papa, and he was struggling just a little bit. That guy would work with him. And that's the only way we got So we owned that great big blue machine backhoe. And so that was the beginning of Didrikson Equipment. And he loved it. That's what he wanted to do the rest of his life, and he did. He did it, and he was just happy. And I was scared to death most of the time.
Were you in Grantsville when
Yes,
you did
we
that?
were living on Apple Street down there. Yeah, that was, and the more of the work that he got, the more equipment he bought. Till he had a big construction company all of his own. And the guy that helped him out in that respect was Pat Gibbons, the owner of that big Gibbons and Reed Construction in Salt Lake. He's the one that stepped in and helped your dad whenever he needed him. He just had a ton of money, but he also owned Gibbons and Reed equipment. And boy, that's what saved Papa, because he liked his work and he liked the way he did it, and he liked the idea that Darrell did not drink or smoke like those other guys did. Most of them were drunk most of the time. So he trusted Darrell in so many of the things, jobs he gave him to do was just because he didn't drink, like those other guys did. So that's where we got started. I'm glad you came over, Steve.
Why is that?
Yeah, it was a hard life.
A little bit.
It was a hard life, Scott. It really was. In fact, when Darrell bought that blue backhoe, if there was ever a leap of faith, that was then, because we didn't have a dime. We didn't have enough money to go up to the grocery store and buy the groceries we needed. Junior Solberg, who passed away, was Dad's same age, and he was working in his dad's store, the Junior Mart that was right up there across the street from the grade school down there. And one day we were out of everything. We didn't even have a bottle of milk. So Darrell went to Junior Solberg was what we called him then, and asked him if he would trust Darrell enough to let him buy a sack of groceries, and when he got his first paycheck, he would pay the whole bill. We didn't have a dime. We didn't have nothing. And Junior Solberg trusted your dad enough that he let him buy his groceries there until that job came along. And that first paycheck that he got, he went right down there and paid that whole bill. So we had some tough times, Scott, but we got through it. Lots of times he helped build Nellis Air Force Base down in Las Vegas, and he was gone 6 and 7 weeks at a time down there without having a single chance to come home, because he was the cement foreman, and they were pouring that great big, that big for the planes to land. And so I didn't get to see most of the time for a long time right at that point in time. After he come home, he says, I'm not ever going to do that again. I'm not going to be on the traveling team in construction. If they won't keep me in the city, I'll quit. And he went right in there, and that's what he told them. So they put him on the City League. He didn't have to travel after that. So.
Who was that working with?
Why, honey?
Who was he working with at that time?
Gibbons and Reed Construction. Yep. And he stayed with them for a long time, Scott, until he got that urge to go out on his own. And then it was Gibbons and Reed that helped him do that. He was in competition with them, but instead of turning their back on him, they helped him get that backhoe and then gave him a job to make the payments. So, boy, we were lucky. We were so dang near starved to death. We didn't have anything. I mean, that was the first time we went to Leroy Solberg. That was Junior Solberg's dad. And Dale asked him if he would let us have groceries until that first paycheck came. And he would pay the whole bill, and he did. We got the groceries we needed. Boy, we lived on bread and milk. I know, but that was mostly what we lived on. We didn't know what a pork chop or a steak or a roast or anything like that even was. We were just down to the nitty-gritty. Learned a lot, though, Scott. Learned what you
Did you
can...
have kids at that time?
Yeah. We had Jim and Debbie. And so we were living in that house on Apple Street. We bought that. I don't know why. I've never figured out why we bought that house even yet today. Didn't have any closet doors on it. It was, those houses, I don't know how they sold them, and they sold every single one. And not one of them had a closet door in the house anywhere.
Huh.
No, it was we had a really tough life a lot of times, Scotty. When we were very first married, we had some real tough times. I can remember sitting in Garland. We lived up above the post office and wondering where we were going to get the money to buy the milk to feed Jim. It was that bad. But we made it. Hooray. We made it, and then, of course, Dale was working for a W.W. Clyde Construction, and they were building Dugway. And he got on that job, which was just a great blessing for us.
And is that when you moved to Grantsville?
That's when we came down here. And we happened to land that apartment right there on Main Street, which was the best apartment in Grantsville, and the people had just barely moved out of it. And we went right in and asked if we could rent it, and he rented it to us. And then...
Do you remember how much rent was at that time?
It was $90-something a month. But it was a really neat apartment. 2 bedrooms and a bath and a half. And then, boy, the kitchen was worth the whole $90 a month. It was really nice. And then he paid me if I'd watch his German police dog. And that dog was bigger than I was. But he wanted to leave the dog in his part of the house because he'd had so many break-ins while he was at work. So I told him I'd take care of his German police dog, who was bigger almost than I was.
Who owned the apartment?
So it's right there on Main Street.
Who owned it?
I think who lives in it now is one of Johnny and Bernadine's sons. Just moved in. It belonged to Johnny Nelson. He was living in it the last. And
Who owned it when you were in it?
John Palmer. John's son had just died of a cancer in his leg. He had a cancer start in his leg, and they ignored it. They didn't know what it was, and so it killed him, and they moved. And so we were still renting the basement when they moved, and the other people just had us stay right there until we got that house on Apple Street. So it was pretty sure that we'd stay in Grantsville by that time. And we did.
Do you remember how big Grantsville was then?
What?
How many people lived in Grantsville at that time?
A lot less than now. I don't know the exact number of people that lived there, honey, but they were there literally because of what did I tell you Grandpa worked in out there?
Dugway?
Dugway. Dugway brought a lot of those people in to work. The work was scarce then when they built Dugway. That was a lot of work for people who had just been right out of work.
Was that the early 50s?
It probably was, Steve. I can't remember.
Debbie,
Jim was a baby.
Debbie was born in 52.
What, honey?
Debbie was born in 52.
Yeah, she was born while we lived in that basement. Yeah, it was a beautiful, boy, that was a neat apartment. Really was. And I liked Grantsville. I got to like it, but when I go to the store here, I'd come with that great big huge German police dog right to the side of me. He was almost bigger than I was. But I learned to love that dog. Just loved him. He never came in my apartment, but the door that went into the furnace room and all that stuff, you know, that's where that dog stayed during the day. And one time the Utah Power and Light man came in and forgot to follow the rules that John had given him. He just opened the door and walked in, and in 2 seconds, that great big German police dog had both front paws on his shoulder and his mouth open that wide. Yes, I got so to just love that dog. Wherever I went, he went. But boy, he scared that Utah Power and Light man clear to death.
How long did you live in that apartment?
We lived there about 1.5 years before they built the homes on Apple Street. We bought one of those.
How long were you on Apple Street?
We were there a good 4.5 years. I liked that little house, but I never heard tell of a contractor, a building contractor, who built homes and left the doors off. There was not a door on one place. And yet they sold every one of those houses up there, over there. Gad, there's a lot of stories to be told.
And then you built this house, or?
Yeah, we did. There was a fellow that came out from Salt Lake and bought this area, you know, all around here to put houses in, and everybody thought he'd lose his shirt, and they thought he was out of his mind and all this kind of stuff. But we could see that chance to get this house, so we went right up there first thing and talked to that builder. And so we were the first ones to get this house. But before that, this was, they still say this house is sitting on a Indian and his dead horse. Still being done under here.
Do you remember how much you bought this house for?
I cannot, Scotty. I can't remember, but boy, it was way less than the same lot would sell nowadays for. It was. This was the first house they built. And so I was really happy to get out of the house with no doors on it. We came up here. I have got that. I think it's 1962. We came here. Yeah, and it was a good move because we've loved being here. We love this house. I mean, it's not a perfect house by any manner of means, but it's what we first moved in, we thought it was. Thought it was just right.
So how old is that stove?
40 years old.
I think it's 51.
Is it what?
That stove?
Did that stove, was it here when the house was built?
We moved it right in there when we moved in.
51 years.
51 years old. And guess what, Scotty? It has one hot plate on top of the stove that works. Boy, you know, a lot of women would scream and yell until they got a decent stove. I've learned to do pretty well with one hot plate. When we moved up here, these homes were nicer than anything Grantsville had ever even seen. They didn't have anything like this here, and they sold just like wildfire.
When did you get the property over there?
We bought that from Verdi Sutton's dad. Verdi was the dad. We bought it from Verdi, and it was since land that he and his brother owned together that their dad had left them, you know. And Gerald just jumped right in and bought that the very minute he heard they were going to sell it. It would have been gone the very next day if he hadn't have gone and bought it when he did. Yeah, it was Verdi Sutton, old Verdi. He's the reason Michelle is still here. She got away from me one day, you know, on her tricycle. That's when that canal across the street, that was a big, wide irrigation ditch. One of the biggest in town. And she got away from me one day and went down to Bird Eye's house, which is that old house right there. And she was crossing the bridge on her tricycle, and she was just a teeny little girl, and tipped over and fell in that ditch. And Bird Eye was sitting on his front porch, and you know, he could hardly walk. But he went out there and grabbed, because if she'd have gone under the culvert, she'd have surely drowned. There wouldn't have been any way in the world they could have saved her, because the culvert was long. And so, boy, I'll never forget that. We had 2 little kids drowned in that ditch when it was so big. That was the biggest irrigation ditch in Grantsville. And we got her out of it, but just before they went into the culvert, it was Bird Eye that got her out. Boy, I think that's in all those journals that's in there. I finally gave up. I ran out of a closet room, and the energy to write in her. But Debbie still writes, doesn't she?
Yep.
Every night. I taught her to, and Michelle, you didn't want to learn. So.
Were you born in Clarkston or?
I was born in Clarkston. Yep. I was in my grandma and Milo's old house, and when I mean an old house, it was worse than that. The stairway going to the bedroom, Steve, was outside the house. So in the middle of the winter, and Clarkston's right up there in the worst of the mountains that have the worst winters, they'd have to go out and tramp up that outside stairway to get into their bedrooms, and their clothes would be all covered with snow, and their shoes would be all covered with snow, and then they'd climb in those beds half frozen to death and wet. I don't know how they lived as long as they did. That was amazing. But that outside stairway, I always wondered about that. I always thought, what lame brain would ever put an outside stairway in a house, you know? But that was there as long as that house was. When they tore the house down, of course it went with the house, but by Godfrey, it was there as long as I was growing up.
Was it an addition? Is that what happened? Did they add a second floor?
Yeah, they had all of the beds were in one great big bedroom up above. No, it wasn't great big because that house was not great big, but they were all up there on the floor.
Were there no windows?
There was a door as you went in, and then right straight across from the door was the only window that was up there.
Why would there be snow in there? No
because the stairs going up to that bedroom was outside. Sometimes the snow on those stairs was that high.
Why would the beds be
because
covered with snow?
Because they go up there in a snowstorm on the outside of the house, and they would be soaked, and their shoes would be soaked, and Jeffrey.
So were you born in the bedrooms?
I was born in what was Grandma's big front room, kitchen, everything. And that house, wish I had that picture, that house was literally a 2-bedroom house with an upstairs in it. And it was, to my dying day, I'll never know how Grandma had Thanksgiving dinners there with all those people. And the kitchen was that old coal stove. And I don't know how she ever cooked. We didn't have turkeys. We didn't know what a turkey was. We had chicken. She cooked 3 and 4 chickens in that old coal stove, you know, for Thanksgiving. And still, to this day, we had more fun there than I'll ever remember. My grandpa played the violin. And he would play, and Aunt Ruby would play the organ that she could play. There was an organ in the front room, and they'd dance. And I swear, that house moved every time they danced. That was the oldest, poor-looking, sad house. You wondered how people could live in there. And then there was the stairs up to the outside. And when we got up there, it still amazes me, you guys, because when they would get up in the morning and get out of what they called their beds, which was nothing but a mattress, an old mattress that they stuffed with straw and chicken feathers and all that kind of stuff, and then sewed it together, and that's what you slept on. If one of those pieces of straw stuck you in the back, you'd just scream a while. Boy, those were tough days. If you got through those days, you could pronounce that you were one of the tough ones. Oh my gosh.
Did you have family reunions back then?
Oh yeah, they were some of the best. They were some of the best I've ever been to. And how in the wide world did they cook enough food in that old coal stove to have a family reunion? But they did. And I can remember, and it suddenly dawned on me one day, why you can go to the store and buy a cut up chicken, and you see that little bit of blood that's right close to the bone, on those chickens that you buy from the store. Well, one day it dawned on me, when we killed a chicken, we hang it by its legs on the clothesline for nearly a whole day before they ever cooked it. And there was never any blood by the bones, not one bit. That's the reason.
How many brothers and sisters did your mother have?
Dad had 4 brothers. No, he had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. The one was just born and then died shortly after that. But he had a sister named Lula, who was the prettiest. I've never seen a prettier woman than that ever to this day. That picture of her haunted me. I used to go stand by it because she was so beautiful. She died when she was 18 of cancer. She was engaged to be married, and that fellow went right over to the Logan Temple and was sealed to her right after her funeral. He was engaged to be married to her. And her name was Jenny, and she was very beautiful. Dad's sister was. Dad had a brother that died of sarcoma cancer, and it was right there on his shoulder where he used that gun. He hunted, and the food he got when he went out with that gun to hunt, is what they lived on. Sometimes it was jackrabbits, gad, and other times it was pheasants, and sage hens are about as bad as a jackrabbit. But Grandma made the best bread on earth, and to this very day I can't tell you how. I don't know where she kept the flour. I know very well, as sure as I'm sitting here, it had weevil in it, because there's no place to put it. It's just sitting there in the what are those sacks called, Steve?
Gunny sack?
Gunny sacks. They were, that's where it sat until that flour was gone. And I know, as well as I'm sitting here, boy, I chopped down those slices of hot homemade bread just like anybody else. I didn't even think about it then. But now you couldn't pay me $100 just to have one piece of that bread, because I know those weevil were in it.
So was that your Grandma Thompson's house?
That was Grandma Thompson and Grandma Myler both. They both lived in Clarkston, and Grandma Thompson lived on one end of Clarkston. She had a big house and a big family. And then one of her sons and his whole family moved back in with Grandma and her whole family. Oh, boy. And then Grandma Myler was my mom's mother and dad, and they lived up the hill, over the hill. I used to say, I'm going over the hill to Grandma's house, and that's where I'd go, and the bottom of my shoes would be pasteboard. I'd cut it the same size as my shoe was and put it inside the shoe, because I had a hole in every pair of shoes I owned. So I'd go flopping up and down that hill to Grandma Myler's house with those shoes. Yeah.
So So were you born in Grandma Myler's house?
Yeah, I was.
Thompson.
Yeah, no, Grandma Myler's. Grandma Thompson had such a big family, and her house was as big as any house in Clarkston, but she didn't have any, even an inch of square room anywhere.
Where did your mom and dad live when you were born?
We lived in a log cabin. There was a log cabin right across the street from Grandpa and Grandma Myler, and you'd go across the street and then up a little hill, and sitting right there on top of that hill was that log cabin. I loved that log cabin. I can hardly remember. I think I was only 4. And Mother would bottle all that fruit all summer long. Anything she could get her hands on, she'd bottle it. And then we'd go up the outside stairs on that little house up across the street, and put all the fruits that she bottled upstairs in that upstairs bedroom, which I don't know how the bottled fruit ever made it, because in the warm part of the summer you could fry an egg on the upstairs in that little house up there. And in the winter, God, we had to chop the snow and ice off the outside stairway to get up to the bedrooms to go to bed. No wonder we were tough. We had to be. But then when I went and traveled, like I told you, with the construction with Dean and Daryl and Phyllis, Dean's wife, and we learned that we could do anything if we had to. But we never mastered that coal stove oven. We could make bread in it. We could make a cake in it. We just could not make that. That was the worst oven on earth right there. We had to cook on a hot plate.
Did you cook cakes in a different kind of stove before you went there?
In every other place we went, but up there above Preston, Idaho, when we lived up there, that stove, we couldn't do much with that at all. We finally went and bought a hot plate.
When did your parents move to Garland?
Dad was a barber in Clarkston, and he couldn't make a living. That was too small of a town. And he cut every man's hair there. But number 1, they were all too poor to get their hair cut. And number 2, he just couldn't make a living there. We just couldn't make it. So he went to Garland, and he was the only barber in Garland or Tremonton. And he only charged 25 cents a haircut. Yeah, free. Anyway, he tried walking from Clarkston from Garland to Clarkston for not several years, I bet 3 years. He nearly froze to death. He just very nearly did freeze to death. The coal man came up the hill from down in Newton, and Dad was on the ground. He'd have been a goner. The coal man picked him up, gave him a ride, and home on the coal truck.
How far was that?
Oh, hey, that was a good 5-6 miles, maybe more. And so that's the only way he had lived through that. But after that happened, Dad decided there's only one thing to do, and that would be move his family to Garland, where he worked. So they moved us down there, and boy, Mother and Dad never wanted to be one place but in Clarkston. So even in the worst winter on the face of the earth, we would get in that old Model T Ford and go around that mountain and up and over and down the other side into Clarkston. And those tires on that Model T Ford looked like bicycle tires. That's just what they look like. I don't know to this day how we ever lived to be as old as we are. Boy, we had some, and then when we got stuck, which was always, Mother and I were the ones that had to get out and push that stupid little Model T Ford out so to go home, get us home. All the while she was doing that, she was saying, I'm not going to go to Clarkston one more time in a Model T Ford. And then I went out there one day and we were getting ready to go to Clarkston, and there was Dad out there who never swore twice in his life. He was in the bishopric 14 years. That's why. And he was out there kicking the tire on that. He hated that Model T Ford worse than I did, and that was bad. He was kicking the tire on it and calling it, you son of a bitch, just as hard as he could kick that tire. And my dad never swore. I never even thought he knew how. But boy, as soon as he could get rid of that Model T Ford, he didn't even have to shed a tear. He was so glad to see that. I was thrilled beyond words to see the last of that. I think we had the last Model T Ford in Utah. We had some experiences though on that old car. Dad, you know, he didn't have a heater, so somebody had to have a bag of salt in their hand, either me or Mother, and we'd go along, and then in 2 minutes the windows would just be fogged right over. So we had to take that bag of salt, run around and get all the windows cleaned right off, and get back in that Model T Ford. It'd be snowing like a son of a gun, and away we'd go, and it'd last about a block.
So
Boy.
Did you go to school always in Tremont and not Clarkston?
I was just before I would have gone to school in Clarkston when we moved. So I went to school down in Garland to start with, right after which I got rheumatic fever and was out of school for a whole year with rheumatic fever. It's a good thing I didn't have all the repercussions you get from having that, and I didn't get one of them. One of them is it affects your heart so bad. But anyway, we moved to Garland, and in this funny little old house, I guess it was the only one available in Garland. Didn't have any running water on the inside of the house, didn't have an inside bathroom. But my mother was the cleanest woman who ever drew a breath. And if she saw a spot of dirt in her house, she couldn't stand it. And so, you know, I grew up scrubbing floors and stretching curtains. You know, I put them on that big old curtain stretcher. And they had to be spotless, or she washed them, and we had to stretch them again. The ends of my fingers were just bloody from trying to put the curtains over those nails that stick out, you know. And when they came out the curtain stretchers, they were beautiful. They were just gorgeous. But if I ever come home from high school and saw the stretchers out there, I wanted to just turn and run the other way. Yeah, that was a terrible job. My mother happened to be the cleanest woman on the face of the earth. There couldn't even be a spot of dirt in her house anywhere. And we used to clean the ceilings in that house was papered, it was called. And this stuff, it was pink. I'll never forget it. You'd have to work it with your hands until it was pliable, you know, and kind of soft. Then you'd start cleaning the ceiling. As long as I draw a breath, I'll hate that. Oh, I hated that job. Every time you bring the brush this way to clean the ceiling, or this way, then all that dirt and the other stuff would fall down on the floor. Oh, brother.
Was there like a coal stove or something that made the ceiling dirty?
Yeah, that was what did it, Steve. It was that we had a heater that it was called I've forgotten the name of that heater. I thought I never would, but it was a great big heater. It's as big as this stove, or this table. And we used that to heat all the house except the kitchen. We had a coal stove there. And that's where I learned to chop wood and haul coal. Was then. Those days were, when my mother would wash clothes, she'd have to put a boiler on top of this coal stove fill it full of water, and then wait. Just keep that old coal stove just buzzing along, you know. Couldn't even stop for a breath. And that boiler had to boil. And then she poured it in the old-fashioned washing machine, and brother. Then there was 2 great big tubs that were rinse tubs. And, oh, Jeffrey, I could tell you a lot of stories about that. We had to do it, so I guess we didn't know any better. We didn't know anything about the good stuff, not then.
I want to hear some of your sayings.
Like, knee-high to a tall Indian.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to say that one anymore. I might get plowed right in the nose. It would go along and Mother would say, your hands are as cold as a well-digger's foot. Or else Dad was a classic with those cliches like that. He would, let's see, what was one of his favorite ones?
Pull your ears.
What?
Pull your ears.
Pull your ear as long as.
Dad did that a lot. Gosh, she had so many of those. Well, your mom's got a lot of them written down. But they were cliches that everyone all over Clarkston used. That's probably the only thing they had to take up their time. Wasn't anything else up there. Oh, it was beautiful though. Back in the spring of the year, Clarkston was one of the prettiest places. And we'd go up what we call Long Hill, and at Memorial Day, you know, we would go up Long Hill with my Aunt Jenny, who was as old as I am. She still loved to climb that hill. And we'd come back with armloads of let's see, Indian paintbrushes, they were called, and they were red, beautiful red flowers. And we got the Seagull lilies, we got the buttercups and the curlicues, and they're all just beautiful flowers. We'd bring those home and go out and put them on the grave, and that's all the flowers we ever put on those graves for years. But to get them, we had to climb the mountain and go up to get them. It was, one way I stayed thin, I was as thin as it could be. Climbed the mountain. But no, you know, I look back and I think we'd sure be a lot healthier if we lived the way we used to. Then we had the homemade ice cream. I think, Scotty, was one of my memories of some of the best stuff that we did. We all had cows. We all had plenty of cream. We made our own butter. We made, and then we'd kill a pig, and then we would, what is it when you rub all the salt and the
Cure.
What? Cured it.
Cure it.
Yeah, we'd cure that pig and then hang it up in a sack out on the side of the house way high so the animals couldn't get it. And then when Mother needed a piece of that meat, we had to climb the little wooden ladder that Dad built and pounded on the outside of that house. And there was this ladder just going right up there flat against the house. I know we fell off of it a lot of times. Yeah, it was hard work, but you know, we didn't know anything better, so we didn't complain much. Not much, just a lot. And I loved to make that butter and cheese. That was really amazing we could do that. We got so we could make the best cheese there ever was. We made the cheese, and when Dad worked in Garland, and we lived in Tremont, and then Mom and I had to milk the cow, feed the chickens, feed the pigs in the freezing, bitter cold because Dad wasn't there to do it. So we had to. So everything was frozen before we got back to the house, even the eggs. It was cold. You know, I think sometimes to myself, I'd like to go back and just live there and live some of those fun days over. But I decided there were no fun days. We worked our head right off. Boy, if we had to make our own butter. We had to make all our own clothes. We had to we got the flour for the bread, of course, and made that. Best thing I remember in the wide world were those scones. They were good, Scotty. That's when we lived in Tremont, and then when we moved to Garland, the first house we lived in down there didn't have a bathroom at all. And Mother was such a freak about you brushing your teeth every morning. That was never to be missed. That was you just didn't do that. So she'd hand you your toothbrush with the toothpaste on it, and you'd have to go out in 40 below zero by that hydrant and brush your teeth. I've often laughed and said she would have learned a good lesson if we'd walked back in the house with the toothbrush close to our teeth. Boy, they were hard days, but honey, when you look back, there's always some good to every single thing that you do in your life, even the hardest part. I could ride a horse like anybody I was good. I'd ride that horse clear down to the other end of Clarkston, down on the county road, and bring those cows home night and morning. And then they milk the cows, and then I'd get on the horse and take them clear back down to that land at the end of the county road. We drove through there the other day, Max and I. It's been a month or so ago, because now the only way you could ever get to Clarkston was to go up over the mountain in the summer. You wouldn't dare tackle that mountain in the winter. And you'd go down the road going to Logan, turn and go, I think we'd turn and go north. And then go up over that mountain and into Clarkston. And the thing that was so bad was how cold it got right there. That was just this side of Logan. And every time we ever turned that corner, we'd almost, without the exception, get stuck in the snow. But I loved Clarkston. When I think back all those years ago, we didn't have anything. We were very, very poor. But no one in Clarkston had anything. And so we learned to live with it. When we moved to Garland, that was a whole different ballgame. But it was good, Scotty. It was a hard life by today's standards, of course. But back then, it's the only thing we knew. We could wash with the old tub and the boiler and the wringer on the washing machine, all that stuff, and hang clothes outside in the wind and then freeze to the clothesline before you got the clothes peg on. They were better days. I said to Mother, "What do you hang them out there for, Mother? You just go out there and get them. They're still frozen stiff. And you bring them in and they unthaw and they're as wet as when you hang them out there." But that was the way it was, and they didn't change it either. But I know that's why we didn't have pneumonia all the time, because when they brought those frozen clothes in, we had them hanging everywhere in our house to dry because they didn't dry outside. They were frozen. And so the water would just run down the windows, from those clothes drying. I would just see that water just run down those windows. And so I always figured later on in my life that was probably something healthy. I don't know what, but otherwise we'd all be dead, Scott. We had lots of fun. Things we did back then, like we'd run after the trucks going to the factory loaded with pea vines. And the kids all over town would run after those trucks and grab a handful of pea vines and pull them off. And the farmer didn't care. He just went right on his way, let us pull all the things off we wanted, which were not very many. because he wasn't slowing down.
What's a pea vine?
There was a pea, what, honey?
Oh, like peas?
Those peas.
Okay.
And then there was a pea factory right there in Tremont, just north of Tremont. And God, that was fun. We'd haul them over to my mother's lawn or somebody else's mother's lawn. We'd sit down, spend a whole afternoon eating peas. That was, and then of course they did away with the factory where they were canning all those peas. They don't do that anymore. They don't even grow them anymore much, Scott. Some other place, I think, has taken on that job, but Clarkston just doesn't do that. It was an interesting life, honey. And yet, as hard as it was, there were always fun things that just kind of made you forget what a tough life you were really living. We'd make this homemade honey candy. You stretched it, you know, or we'd make it the taffy candy and stretched out. And I'll never forget that one time Mother was just stretching this candy for all she was worth, and Dad walked in the house and the dog followed him. And when Mom would pull that candy out, that dog would jump up there and get a mouthful before she even knew what happened. She was ready to kill the dogs. That was good candy, by the way, and I did finally get the recipe. Got it from my Aunt Ruby's daughter. She's the only one that got it.
You have it?
We have it.
We'll have to get my dad stretching some candy.
Yeah.
Oh, Scott's a good stretcher. He
Honey.
stretch the candy and the curtains.
Well, Steve, your wife has that recipe for that candy. I'm glad you guys came over.
Do you have
Hey,
any
Steve.
more Papa stories, Nana?
And what, honey?
Do you have any more stories about Papa?
A million, honey. I'll tell you one thing about Papa, Scotty. There wasn't a man who ever lived that loved to hunt like Papa. That rifle and Papa were just inseparable. Every time there came a hunting season, and all the seasons were open, you know, he never missed a one. And he used to hunt deer. He'd hunt sage hens. He'd hunt turkeys. He'd hunt everything there was to hunt. Papa was there, and he loved it. Deer. I'll tell you a story about deer, honey. Mother and I hated deer so bad that there's no way to describe it. And so, but Dad just insisted, goodbye, Stever.
I gotta go back to the church.
Dad would insist Mother cook that deer that he got, you know. And Mother said to me one day, Colleen, come here and stand by me and watch what your dad does. And he'd get that piece of deer and he'd push it over here. And then he'd take a bite of the other food, and then he pushed it over here. He never ate that deer his own self, but he thought he could somehow or another force all of us to eat it. We couldn't even stand it. We had a lot of fun in those years, though, and it was a lot of hard work. My dad never once went hunting, ever went hunting deer that he didn't bring one home. We used to just hate deer hunting time, because we didn't come bring one of those dang deer home and we had to eat it, or pretend to. That's when the dogs got the best meals they had in a long time, because that's where that deer would go. But Grandpa Thompson was such a hunter. That was his whole life. Hunting deer, hunting pheasants, hunting sage hens, hunting anything like that. And fishing. And that was his second great love. But he loved all those kind of things, and that's the way I remember growing up, was because he'd get all those wild things to eat. We'd have to eat them. And I didn't like one of them either. But he just loved to do that. I can remember going hunting pheasants with him, and I'd walk behind him and try to walk my footsteps in his, you know. But he always let me go with him to hunt pheasants. I did like pheasants. That's one of the few things I liked. I had a great life, Scotty. When I was young and went to high school, you know, I was in the Lariats, they were called, you know. I was in that marching team. I was also in the choir. And back then, when I was in high school, was when the war was on, we didn't have any gas. Getting a gallon of gas was like finding a gold mine somewhere. And then, with that little bit of gas that somebody got, 20 of us would pile on that car, on the top, on the running board, on the hood, on the trunk, and we'd go through town just yelling and carrying on, and that was the most fun that ever was. But we just didn't have any, you couldn't afford to buy gas. And I had saved a pair of nylons for, oh gosh, I'm just going to take a wild guess, it was like 4 years. They were so scared they had them limited, you know. One pair of stockings to one soul, and I got this pair of stockings determined I was going to save it until I got married. And so the day we got married, I took my dress, you know, to put on after we were married in the temple, and I put that was the prettiest dress on, and then I put those I'd hoarded those socks all those years, all that long time. I put those on and then put on my high heels. I thought I was Mrs. Astorbilt, you know. And went around the corner and caught those nylons on the corner of one of those where you hang your clothes.
Clothesline?
Yeah. Well, and I went around the corner in the temple and caught my stocking on that corner, and that just ripped that stocking from top to bottom. I had saved it forever. Oh boy. We didn't have, sugar was rationed. We had very little sugar. Anything cooked with sugar, we just about went without, honey. Are you going to go back today?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Yep.
I see I don't have a stove here that my oven quit, so I wanted to make here rice pudding.
Oh, that's okay. I'm going to come back again.
Oh, I hope you do. In the meantime, I'll write some things down.
Okay.
But it was a great life, but it was a tough one, Scott.
Yeah.
But that's why we grew up so tough, I guess, because we lived there.
Yep.
It was fun.
Alrighty.
Is this yours, honey, right here?
Yeah, I'll grab it.